Disturbing camping encounter by Corona isn't bad. Here's some background. I work summers as a camp chancellor in the northern parts of Ontario, Canada. On this particular date that the incident occurred, I was camping with a group of 10-year-old boys on the same lake the summer camp was based on. So like a routine camping trip, we canoe out to the site and we set up our tents. Me and my co-chancellor, Mike, take turns supervising the kids while they swim, build forts and play around, etc. We then cook food and make a campfire and sit around telling stories. We just do the typical Canadian camping things. So it gets to about around 9:30. I tell the kids that it's time for bed and they all head into their tents, which are all positioned a small walk away from the shoreline, but still in sight of from where we had the fire pit. So as the kids are wandering back, me and Mike are just sitting by the water having a cigarette, just basically hanging out before we decided to head into our own tent and call it a night. What happened next troubles me to this day and remains my go-to campfire story. We were both gazing into the pitch black night water when we saw a small light approaching us slowly and slightly above water level. We sat there for a while trying to speculate exactly what this could have possibly been for a few minutes. Then it came close enough for us to see what it was. It was a torch mounted on the front of a kayak that had somebody approaching our campsite. Now, it is important to mention that as the camp chancellor, part of our training goes over how to deal with strange encounters in an environment where that we're responsible for taking the safety of the children into our own hands. So I was getting ready to tell this guy that we're part of a recognised organisation and we would respectfully ask that they find another campsite. However, this person's appearance shook me to the bone as the light drew nearer. Paddling this kayak was a woman. She looked to be in her 60s. She had incredibly long wisps of grey hair that was trailing in the water. Her skin looked like it was very old, as if it had been out in the sun for way too long. And her dead looking eyes were tough to spot under her wrinkles. She just looked directly at me, and when she spoke I recognised that she was missing most of her teeth. "Are all your children safely in bed?" she asked me, pointing in the direction of where the tents were. Not really knowing how to respond and quietly, frankly, being petrified, I responded by telling her that they were fine and that she had to leave. "That's good." Just as expected for this time. She said this with a smile and just paddled back into the darkness. At this point, me and Mike were absolutely terrified of not only the appearance of the mystery woman who resembles a corpse, but also her inquiry on the whereabouts and safety of the kids we had brought on this trip. Not knowing what else to do, we grabbed our hunting knives and sat by the fire after checking on the kids. Half an hour later, we're sitting there and things get really creepy. Across the lake, a female chancellor was leading another trip of kids of the same age group. She sent me a text which read something along the lines of the following: "Hey Sean, stop screwing with us, this isn't funny, my kids are scared." I instantly called her and let her know what I had just seen, and that there was somebody nearby the campsite and there was just something very off about them. I explained that I was not trying to joke with her. Apparently, one of their kids had opened their tent door to go to the toilet and seen a woman with long hair standing there with arms open towards the shoreline pointing at them. Horrific Night Camping by Scheibler 1964. Let me start off by saying for reference that I was 19 years old at the time of this and I'm female. I loved camping. Anytime my friends and I came home from college, we would load up our cooler with beer, grab some gear and go screw around outside. Unfortunately, When I was actually at school, none of my sorority sisters or friends ever wanted to go out with me, so I would often suffer withdrawals from camping. One day the weather was way too nice to be wasted, so I grabbed some of my gear, hopped in my car that I borrowed from a buddy and drove to a spot that was scheduled within a safe distance of civilization that I could easily go and run to if I needed any help. Now, camping does creep me out sometimes, but it's sometimes fun to be scared, right? So I make a little camp and get a fire going. I hadn't brought all of that much food to eat, but I was really enjoying myself, reading and looking around the area, that sort of thing. I then got this feeling that I was being watched and I stopped dead in my tracks. I heard a twig crunch over to my right, then see a dew bolt from 100 feet or so in front of me. I laughed at myself and went back to the camp with the armful of wood that I had just gathered. I kept freaking out though. I kept hearing sounds just outside of the ring lights caused by the fire. I always get inside my head though, so I just shrugged it off and kept whittling at the stick that I'd been messing with. So it gets to about around 1 and I eventually decide to go into my tent and turn out the lantern. Now, I'd been chugging down beers in the most unladylike fashion and smoking cheap cigars, so I passed out relatively quickly. However, at around 2, I started hearing footsteps. They sounded pretty light and sort of timid. I think to myself that it's just a deer or another animal, more likely a raccoon because I had probably left some food out. I was still on guard though. Then, after about 30 minutes of sleeping with one eye open, I hear a rubbing sound. The tent fabric is being pushed in a bit. I don't know how I wasn't paralysed, but I wasn't. I just sat there. I had desperately wanted to thrust the knife through the tent fabric, but I was still holding out on the hope that it was just some of my buddies coming to joke around with me. I didn't get a chance to get too more scared though, because as soon as it started, it stopped. Now I started feeling slightly more secure because daylight would be coming in about an hour or two, so I didn't have any need to sleep and put myself at further risk. All of a sudden at 4 o'clock, I realised I should put my boots on to make sure that if anything happened I'd be ready. After having stayed up and keeping alert a little bit longer, my friend's car alarm starts blaring. This freaks the life out of me. I get out of my tent. I go about 2 steps out before something grabs me around my mouth. I open my mouth to scream, but inside, the person puts their pinky finger between my teeth. I've heard that people can perform superhuman feats when they have huge adrenaline rises. I, on the other hand, just clamped down on his hand really hard. As a result, he began screaming and pulled his hand out. He literally then took off running down the hill I was camping on, and I took right off in the opposite direction. It must have looked ridiculous to the people whose house I ran to. There was some terrified girl who was running around in steel-toe boots. I also had some blood that oozed out of my lip, but not from biting the finger, but because I also managed to take out a pretty good chunk of my own lip at the same time. I told them what happened and they called the police, got me some real clothing, and the man at the house made a whiskey and coke. The cops did eventually arrive and they went to check it out. When they returned, it was light out again. They brought me back so I could get to my friend's car, but what I found made me even more scared than I already was. As I got there, I saw that right next to the tent was a red gas can. He could have easily put that on the tent and set it on fire, and I would have had no way of surviving. He also had tracks that led back away from the direction he had come, so he obviously returned for some reason. The thing that annoys me is that the guy never got caught, so somewhere out there he could still be lurking. I'm never going camping again, but I'd be afraid of the dark. So here's some background information. I'm 18 and living in Dagenham. It's quite a busy area, so there is normally a lot of people around. This particular night, me and my friend, I'll call him Jim, were on our way to camp out at our local park. You're never normally allowed to go in there past 10 PM, so we have to hide from the park police. The park where we were staying at was usually busy up until about 9, then it turns to a ghost field, anyway to the story. We had set out to the park at about 8:30, so by the time we got there wouldn't be anyone to grass us up. We arrived and had everything packed and things went according to plan. We had the tent, snacks, portable DVD player, Pokemon Go at the ready. It was perfect. 10 PM came and we heard the park police shutting the gates. They're quite loud, so it was always easy to hear the gates creak. Once we were sure the police left, we decided to whip out our phones and play some Pokemon Go. There was a Pokestop in the park and I had lore module to use it. We had been playing for about half an hour when we heard long bangs coming from the gates, like somebody had ran into it. The thing is though, Dagenham's known for its drunks, so we didn't really think anything of it. Cut the long story short, we went back to our tent and we watched a couple of action films and went to sleep. Not even an hour into sleep, I woke up with a horrible sense of dread, almost like somebody was watching me. All my senses were heightened and something just wasn't right. I hear some crunching coming from behind the tent. I thought that maybe it was just a fox until I heard it, or should I say I heard them speak. I managed to make out what their words were, being the following: "They're gonna hear us, just keep your mouth shut." I quietly but violently shook Jim to wake him up and told him exactly what I just heard. I needed to make sure that I wasn't crazy, so I made him also listen. While listening, his face turned white. He turned to me and whispered, saying, "We need to make a run for it, just trust me." We didn't need to hesitate because both of us were quite athletic, so running wasn't going to be a problem. We slowly unzipped the tent and with one big breath made a mad dash for the gate. We heard pounding footsteps and heavy breathing behind us as a guy shouted in a horrible musky voice, "Oi, slow down, we just want to play with you." And both the guys started laughing madly, like seriously. It was so messed up. We made it to the fence and leapt over it just in time. After we got there, we did a mad dash to get to my house, which was only around the corner. We made it, slammed the door shut and ran up to my bedroom to peek out the window. We then saw both the guys sprint past my house, holding something that looked metallic. The thing was, it wasn't just one of them, they were both armed with whatever. At that moment, I turned to Jim and asked why he looked terrified back in the tent. He then turned to face me and said that he heard them say the following: "You grabbed the small guy. The large one's mine. The bigger you are, the more challenging they are." That terrified me. We went back to the tent the next morning and found that all of our stuff had got destroyed. The tent was smashed, portable DVD player was snapped in half and all our food was thrown everywhere. We never told anyone. I think we're too proud to say that we ran off. All I know is that I'm never going camping again. My Scariest Camping Experience by the MN Cloudman. So I consider myself a passionate camper. It's the only hobby I have done that I have taken any real interest in and actually get excited while doing so. More specifically, camping alone. Of course I camp with my friends every once in a while, but nothing really matches the experience of camping in the wild alone. Something about sitting by a fire you made yourself until late and going to bed with nothing but the sounds of the wild to accompany you is kind of magical. Of course, camping alone also means that I experience some pretty crazy crap. Usually it's animals, howls and cries from the woods that send chills down your spine, or animals that take an interest in your tent. I've had bears sniff and bat at my tent before, which absolutely terrifies me and usually keeps me up the rest of the night. I make sure I don't keep any food in my tent though, so no animals ever actually really want to get inside it. The scariest thing that you could ever encounter out in the wild, however, is another person. You think that animal and human footsteps sound relatively similar, but they don't. I've only had it happen twice until now. The first time it was just someone passing on the grass. They didn't do anything, but it still scares the life out of me. The second time, they stopped and waited for a while. They sounded about 20 feet from my tent. I was holding my breath until they just walked off again. However, about a month ago, I had my scariest ever camping experience. It was probably around 2 AM. I had been lying in my sleeping bag for about an hour just listening to the sounds of the wild when I heard footsteps approaching. I remember how they sounded as though they were brushing through the grass. They kept getting closer and closer, and at this point, I was pretty freaked out. It sounded like they were directly approaching my tent, and they were. They stopped right in the front of my tent entrance. I was trying my hardest to keep my breathing quiet. I always take a handgun with me when I go camping, though I don't actually take it in case there's other people. I only take it in case there's animals that are lurking or anything that I can't scare off. That was the first thing to come to my mind when they stopped in front of my tent. I need that gun. I had then reached very slowly and quietly into my backpack and managed to draw it quickly. I did this as quietly as possible and held it very tightly. I was just staring at my tent door. What happened next really scared me. The person outside of my tent began to unzip my door. It was slow, like they were trying to be quiet. At this point, I was thinking, no more playing assumptions, you need to make sure that you don't get yourself murdered. So, I flipped off the safety. The person stopped unzipping my tent door after that sound. They heard the click too. I choked out the words, "Who's there? I have a gun." After that, the person ran off faster than I've ever heard anybody run. I couldn't shut my eyes after that. I was shaking. I thought for sure that I was either going to get killed or kill someone that night. My summer camp experience by Jason99. So every summer I go to this camp deep in Pennsylvania called French Creek Bible Camp. I was in the grade that covered the 11 to 12 year olds. Now there's been many stories passed around over the years about evil creatures living in these woods. One was called the Goat Man. He was described to be like the devil himself, having red eyes. Some claimed that they saw him, but I didn't believe them. There used to be 5 different sleeping areas in this camp, 2 for guys and 2 for girls, but a couple of years ago, sleep in area 5 burned to the ground one night, while people were actually camping there. No one's sure how the fire actually started because the cabins don't have electricity, and fire officials said it wasn't a forest fire that caused the unit to burn down. That was really strange enough. Now, I was in Unit 4, the furthest away from civilization. One night, our cabin door swung open and crashed against the wall as if somebody had kicked the door, but we shined a flashlight outside to investigate and we literally saw nothing. We then told some people the following morning about what had happened to us, and they didn't really think much of it. Now keep in mind that it wasn't windy at all. Was this a sign that we shouldn't be there? Now, this is where stuff got intense. It was the second to last night before we were supposed to go home. Once again the weather was calm. It was around 2:30 AM where my entire cabin was awoken by the loud sound of our wooden door being slammed open. Moments later, we hear a loud cracking noise and notice that a large tree next to our cabin is falling towards us. I believe in the split second I looked out of the window and at the falling tree that I saw something near it. The tree then fell onto our cabin and crashed through our roof, and literally right next to where my cabin's mate's bed was. Had I have not been looking out that window, then he would have definitely been crushed to death by the weight of the tree and the ceiling that was collapsing. This was a very large tree too. It would have been really hard for somebody to push it down by themselves. Everybody in the surrounding area came to see what happened and to make sure that we were okay. When we came to investigate exactly why the tree had fallen, it looked like somebody had cut across the bottom with a chainsaw. The weird thing is that we were so close to them that it would have almost been impossible for us not to have heard them cutting it. I truly believed that something or someone was out there trying to kill us or whatever. I have never been back to that place since. Who knows who or what could have been lurking in them trees. The Potential Horrors of Camping by Abe413. My boyfriend and I are a young couple in their mid-college years. We decided that we wanted to get away from work and our studies for the weekend, so we took a trip to the nearest hiking trail that is part of the Appalachian route. We decided to leave on Friday once I got off work, and backpack up the trail in order to get to the camp for the weekend. I work in a restaurant, so that makes it very difficult for me to get time off work. I ended up leaving work at around 4, but we said that no matter what, we would be going on this trip. So we finally left for the trail and we began hiking at around 5:30. My boyfriend was an Eagle Scout, so we had all of the necessary supplies for a successful camping trip. The first part of the hike was absolutely exhausting. It was up a hill and we were both carrying at least 40 pounds of our metal framed backpacks. About an hour later we finally passed by the first shelter. If not many of you are sure of what this is basically a 10 by 15 foot log cabin that only has 3 walls. It is open to the outside though. It's only really used to shelter people from the rain or used as a place to stop if people want to go to sleep. Midway through the hike it began to pour dramatically in the forest. Sooner or later we were both soaked from head to toe. Thick fog also grew quickly and it had been a hot and humid Friday anyway. The trail became very slippery and our pace slowed down tremendously. We hoped that we were getting closer to the camping site, but it turned dark very quickly. We took a rest in the dark as it poured, and we hoped that we would be able to soon find our head lanterns, which we did. After finding them, we put them on. We were still struggling to balance ourselves on top of the rocky and muddy path. I thought that by that point we would never make it to the shelter. We walked though, never giving up, although I wanted to. My socks and shoes were wet and I was tired and hungry and very cold. It was around 8:30 when we finally made it through to the second shelter and campgrounds. There was a split path though. Either you could walk straight to continue to the top of the view, or you could turn slightly right to walk to the campgrounds, or then take a 90-degree turn to the right to walk down to the shelter. At this point we were both drenched head to toe and we needed to dry off. It was still raining to beat that, so we decided that it would have been nearly impossible to set up our tents and camp, so we realised we'd just have to stay put in the shelter until the rain stopped. Once we got down to the shelter, we saw that there was a man and woman in their 60s there. We instantly thought to ourselves that they were an older married couple who wanted to get away for the weekend too. We told them that we were not bothering them for too long and we just wanted to set down our backpacks and attempt to dry off. They were very welcoming to us with a lantern and an absorbing towel to help us dry off. We both took off our shirts because we were carrying a lot of weight in water. The couple seemed to be very normal, and the man brought a very cute dog with him that I played with. We began introducing ourselves with our names and where we're from and what we were doing. They both said they were in their 60s. Their names were Joe and Maya, and that they were just messing around for the weekend. In between the sentences, they were also taking large gulps of what seemed to be alcohol in a water pack. They said that they were just there having fun, having met online, but they were dropping hints that they were on there having an affair. The older woman, who says she comes from West Virginia, striked off to be very normal at first, but then on closer inspection something was off. It began with her looks, having looked very scraggly. She had shoulder-length grey hair with circular glasses resting on her face. Her teeth were very dark and nearly covered with a brown film, as if she used to be hard on drugs. She wore a pullover, hiking boots and jeans and shorts. Joe, on the other hand, was just an average white male who had grey hair and was a tad overweight. They spoke about their past employments and what they had done in their life. Maya said that she had been a writer, which I admired. Information about ourselves was also exchanged and they seemed very friendly. I was in a very bad mood though, and I felt a lot better after I smoked a bit. My boyfriend and I periodically showed each other our phones in order to communicate, as we didn't have a bit of service in the shelter. We agreed that it was okay if we started smoking since they were becoming drunk. They said they didn't mind but wanted to join in. I thought it was absolutely insane that they wanted to smoke too at that age. The woman may have only took 2 hits, but she was even struggling to flick the lighter. The guys began their own conversation and the woman and I veered off on our own as well. The woman began asking me to tell her a story. As she inched closer and closer to me, she would then ask me to tell her a story even more aggressively. She grew more and more demanding, saying, "Tell me a story." My boyfriend and I met online, just as they did, so I was going to tell her about the story of how we met. I began with the story, "So you met him online, right?" The woman nearly cuts me off and angrily says, "What? Why would you say that?" I said to her, "You all met online, right?" She cuts me off again and more aggressively says, "Wait, why did you say that?" I said it again. "Earlier, Joe said to me that you met online, didn't you?" She then nearly shouts and growls, "Why would you say that?" I wanted to jump away from that conversation so quickly, so I asked her, "Well, you're a writer, right? So why don't you tell me about your best stories?" The woman became far more happier and giggly at this point. She then goes on to tell me that, yes, I am a writer. In my mind. I was extremely confused and creeped out at this point and didn't really know what to say. I'm the type of person to laugh it off, so that's just what I did. She enjoyed being a writer in her mind. I looked over at my boyfriend in Joe's conversation. It seemed to be as normal as it could be. There was absolutely nothing wrong about it, but Maya gave me these chills and she got my attention again, getting closer into my face, asking me what I was saying. The problem was that I wasn't saying anything. I was absolutely silent, ignoring her, and she began talking to herself. She would make very in-depth hand gestures as she spoke to herself, then would ask me what I was saying to her. I wasn't saying a single word and she would wonder why I was telling her those things. She would then cut me off abruptly again and say, "Yes, no, maybe, no way, yeah, I can't wait, huh?" as she rocked back and forth, waving her arms around. She began crossing her legs, holding her arms up in the air above her head, shouting, "Coming out, I'm calling you out, come on." She was nearly talking purely gibberish. The older man's attention was caught and he asked her if she was okay and how she was doing. She said that she was doing just fine and it was only witchcraft. It stormed loudly in the background and was pitch black all around us. A small lamp light rested on a beam above our heads in the middle of the wooden shelter. I was wet and very vulnerable. Everything slowly began to get worse that night. Maya kept slurring her words and she demanded that she get in her sleeping bag. I'm against the wall next to my boyfriend very closely as the man crawled into his sleeping bag. Maya attempted to put her legs in the sleeping bag but couldn't. She moved around for a very long time and finally curled up next to Joe on top of her sleeping bag. She was probably freezing as it was 35 degrees by 9:30. Only a few minutes passed and we heard Maya whisper. Maya said angrily, "What did you give me?" She growled again, "What did you give me?" The man finally woke up and demanded, "What?" Maya hits him on the back and yells, "What did you give me?" She jumped up immediately, facing us. Her eyes were nearly all black and her pupils were greatly dilated. She looked nearly sadistic and yelled at us, "What did he give me?" My boyfriend and I both tense up, nearly having a heart attack. She screams, "What did he give me?" even louder as her voice screeched into my eardrums. She once again turned around to the man lying down next to him. She slowly whispers into his ear, softly growling, "What did you give to me?" It began to run through my mind that he had drugged her, or she was having a flashback or something. Joe attempted to calm her down, but she was still relentless. She stayed down for approximately 5 minutes, but Maya immediately sat up. She faced us with her legs crossed, and she stared at us without breaking eye contact for at least 5 minutes. She did this every so often, sitting up, staring at us and laying back down. She would do this over and over again, so we decided to leave immediately. We finally made our way out, and she stared at us for one last time. We pitched camp as far away as possible, but I remained sleepless that night in fear that Maya would find out where our tent was and crawl into it to do God knows what. At this point in my life, I was pretty down and lonely. I had a lot of people do me wrong, and I just wanted to get away from everything. I was tired of everyone. I just wanted to get away. So that's just what I did. I decided that I would pack some of my things and go out on a camping trip, just to be able to clear my mind and so that other people wouldn't have to disturb me and just let me get on with my own thinking. So I set out to some woods near where that I lived. I knew that I would only make the trip short, but I had enough supplies so that if I needed to stay out there for longer I could. The first part of the trip went really nice and to plan. I found it very peaceful and relaxing just to get away from everything and try and forget about my situation. So I set up my camp for the first night. I didn't have any books or anything, I just had the sounds of nature for entertainment. I really enjoyed being away from everyone. The first night was very peaceful, and I can't lie, it really helped me clear my mind. It was the thing that happened on the second night though, however, that I'm never going to forget. I decided to take a small hike away from my camp. I knew that I was miles away from everyone, so I wouldn't have any need to go back. At least not for a little while, so I could just safely set off without having to worry about my things. I found the hike again very nice and relaxing, and I started to completely turn my mood around. It was very pleasurable, and I liked looking at all of the birds and other nature that was set around me. It began getting dark though, so I decided that I would have to head back soon. As I was heading back though, I could see some lights close to where my campsite was. I was sure that maybe I'd just left the torch on or something, because it was pretty dim, and my torches were pretty bright, so maybe the battery's just about to be drained, I thought to myself. I laughed out loud and said, "Hey, don't mess around, I'm really not in the mood for people," half in a joke to myself, knowing that I was completely alone. What happened next though really scared me. The light instantly went out, and I heard some people scurry away. That's the thing, it wasn't just one person, though there was only one light source. It seemed to be at least 3 or 4 people that scurried off. I wasn't really in the mood for anything like this, so I just jogged back to my campsite. I already felt like people had done me wrong, but I wasn't ready for it to happen again. As I approached my campsite though, I found that the place just stunk of gasoline. As I got close enough, I could see that my tent was absolutely covered in this, and there was a small trail with the stuff leading away to the forest where the people had ran to. I don't know exactly what their intentions were, but it was pretty obvious that they were planning to set this alight, either before I got back or maybe gonna wait until I got back in, hoping that I wouldn't notice a gasoline. I have no idea why they did this today, and I'm pretty sure that they're still out there. Hello everyone, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video then please give it a like and subscribe for my future content. If you have any suggestions for future videos then please leave them in the comments below for me. Hello everyone, Thank you for watching. Sorry this took a little while to come out. It's just the recent videos I've been doing have taken a lot longer to make than I anticipated, but they're all in the works at the minute, and I feel a little bit drained, so I just had to take a few days off, and I actually think I stopped myself getting unwell from doing that, so that was a good thing. But yeah, I hope everybody's doing well. I'm going to be featuring a lot more other narrators soon, like I said, and that's in the works right now. So thank you and have a nice day.